With Aaron Rodgers on the Jets, expectations are sky high. You may disagree with me, but I think it is now Super Bowl or bust for the Jets, and I'll explain why on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms. Subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so that you'll get new episodes as soon as they are uploaded. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. I think it's Super Bowl or bust now for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers. The trade is finally done. Aaron Rodgers will meet the New York media tomorrow afternoon. We are just 2 days away from the start of the NFL draft, and nobody's focused on the draft because the Jets have acquired one of the biggest superstars of his generation in the NFL. That's Aaron Rodgers. And I think with this addition come huge expectations. I think it's fair to say. In fact, I would even go as far to say that it is now Super Bowl or bust for the Jets. And I know some people may disagree with that. I will lay out for you why I believe expectations now need to be very, very high for this football team. And a lot of it comes back to what the Jets gave up and what they can expect. And I think your expectations to determine the success of any move are based on a couple of factors. I think one of them is, what price do you pay for a player? And that price can be in terms of draft compensation. It can be in terms of the money that they're getting. There are a lot of different ways you can look at it. So I have different expectations from the player the Jets will draft at 15th overall on Thursday night if they keep the 15th pick. It's now 15 because the Jets previously had 13. Green Bay had 15. The two teams swapped picks as part of the Rodgers trade. But I will have different expectations for the player the Jets draft 15th overall if they keep that pick than I will for somebody they draft in round 5 or round 6. Isn't that fair? I think so. And on the same note, you have higher expectations for a player the Jets are paying a lot of money to than somebody who's not making much money. I have higher expectations for somebody like C.J. Mosley than I might for somebody like Chuck Clark. You know, C.J. Mosley's making a ton of money. Chuck Clark is not. Chuck Clark's a safety the Jets just acquired from Baltimore. Mosley was a linebacker the Jets signed from Baltimore about 4 years ago. Different expectations. When you look at what the Jets gave up to get Aaron Rodgers, it's an awful lot. You know, when we can go through the trade again. First of all, they swapped picks. Jets dropped from 13th to 15th in the first round this year. They sent a second-round pick to Green Bay, 42nd overall. Next year, they're sending an early pick. It's probably going to be their first-round pick. That depends on how much Rodgers plays this year. If Rodgers plays 65% of these snaps for the Jets or more on offense, then it's a first-round pick. If he plays less than that, it's a second-round pick. And second-round picks, that's not a second-round pick's pretty good. Second-round pick's a pretty big price. And you may say, well, if the Rodgers doesn't play, then the Jets are protected. Giving up a couple second-round picks for a guy who plays less than 65% of the snaps, that's a fairly substantial price. So when you look at what the Jets gave up for Green Bay, the price is high. I don't think there's any way around it. You can be in favor of the trade. You can be happy the Jets got Aaron Rodgers. But I think when people start talking as though the Jets did not give up a lot to get him, I don't think that's necessarily true. And another reason for that is how long they can expect Rodgers to play. Because we know you're probably looking at most, I think best case scenario, you're probably looking at 2 years of Aaron Rodgers. Now, why do I say that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a guy who has seriously considered retirement a number of times in recent years. I mean, you can go back to the Pat McAfee show appearance last month when he announced that he intended to play for the Jets in 2023. He told you he was about 90% of the way towards retiring. It's not uncommon. He's 39. In the NFL, players don't last that long. Players don't, there are not many 39-year-olds in the NFL. And, I think in a lot of ways, Tom Brady may have skewed some of our perceptions when we talk about, what we can expect as a normal aging curve for a quarterback or even players at other positions. 39's old. I don't know that you can necessarily expect Rodgers to play that much longer. It just doesn't happen in this league. And beyond that, even if he wants to continue playing, how long will he continue to play at a high level? Because, the list of quarterbacks in recent memory who have played in, age 40 and beyond and played effectively, it might just be Tom Brady. Peyton Manning declined near the end of his career. You talk about guys in their 40s. Drew Brees, he was we kind of lost track of it. Drew Brees was a shell of himself by the end of his career. And you can even look at some guys some guys who were in their late 30s. Phillip Rivers was not the player he used to be. Matt Ryan is really, kind of finished. Quarterbacks, you reach a certain point and you just physically can't do it anymore. Tom Brady's the exception. Well, Tom Brady's, even Aaron Rodgers is not Tom Brady. And that's painful to say because Rodgers is now a Jet, and of course Brady is a Jets nemesis. But I don't think, I've heard people talk about Brady, and there's an argument to be made because of the era we live in where roughing the passer is so prevalent for star quarterbacks that it's tougher to hit these guys, that maybe they last a little bit longer, but it's not easy. And even if Aaron Rodgers intends to play longer, at some point your body just breaks down. And Brady, going back to him, he had just the most rigorous nutritional workout regimen any player has had, and that's one of the reasons he stayed at the top of his game. And I don't know that Rodgers necessarily has that type of regimen. So all this is to say that expectations are high for that reason, because you're not going to get him for very long. There's a third reason behind this, and this is one I'm a little bit more hesitant on, because at this point we still don't know exactly what's going on with the contract. The current contract Rodgers has with Green Bay means that the Jets would have to pay him about $60 million this year. Now, of that, only $15 million or so is going to count against their salary cap. The other $45, it's in that ballpark, maybe off $1 million or $2 million, but it's in that ballpark where it's $15 million this year and then $45 million in dead money in future years. That's a lot of money. I don't need to tell you that's a lot of money. Now, there are rumors out there that maybe Rodgers has amended the contract, that perhaps this is not going to be as bad. We'll wait to see, because that could mean a couple things. It could mean Rodgers is taking a straight pay cut, which would be helpful to the Jets, because that would mean no $60 million. It would mean less than that. However, it could also mean that he just decided to defer more of the money against the cap. The way the NFL salary cap works is that if you get what's known as a bonus payment, you get that money up front. So it works for you. If you get money in the form of a bonus, you don't have to wait till the autumn, till the winter to get paid. You get the money up front. But the salary cap hit is spread over multiple years. So it could also be a situation where Rodgers is not necessarily taking less money. It's just he's getting a bonus payment, which means he gets more up front, but the Jets are not charged as much. So perhaps they lower that $15 million or so cap hit this year. But in any event, I think we can assume Aaron Rodgers is going to be making quite a bit of money. So when you look at, the price, Jets gave him a ton of draft picks. First and the second round. I think we can assume it's going to be a first round pick. And if it's not a first round pick, this trade probably hasn't gone well anyway. So first round pick, second round pick. That's up there. There are not many. You're essentially a superstar in his prime if you're traded for more than that. His age, you can't expect much from him. Or at least you can't expect him to play much longer. And third, what should be a big contract. I think even if the Jets are able to amend the contract so that it's lower, the price is still going to be very high. So all these things suggest to me that the outcome is going to have to be excellent for the Jets. And I look at this and I say Super Bowl or bust. Now, there's another reason I say that, and that's the Jets' history. And it's the torture that we've all been through as Jets fans. I have never lived to see a Jets Super Bowl. Odds are you have not, and if you have, it was a long time ago. As we continue on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast, I'll go into that a little bit deeper. I'll explain why the Jets really need Aaron Rodgers to end this long drought of championships. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. In the autumn, long passes, touchdowns, sacks will be back, and Aaron Rodgers will be quarterbacking the Jets, but we still have a little bit to go before the NFL season begins. However, grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are already back because baseball season has begun, and there's no better place to get into that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you do not win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen every day. Aaron Rodgers finally a Jet, and I think that makes expectations sky high. And I think part of the reason is this has been a long road for the New York Jets and their fans. It's been 12 years since we've made the playoffs. It'll be 13 this year if the Jets miss it. But it's also been over 5 decades since the New York Jets have won the Super Bowl. I have never seen the Jets win the Super Bowl. Odds are you have not seen the Jets win the Super Bowl. And if you have, and if you were fortunate enough to be there 1968, 1969, it's been a long wait for you. And I think that history has to be measured against the current backdrop. I think, there are many reasons that I view this season as Super Bowl or bust for the Jets, but one of the biggest is we've been there. We've done that. And, I see people getting excited. I can't blame you if you get excited about the Jets acquiring a big name like Aaron Rodgers. You should be. You've had so few moments of joy as a Jets fan that you should embrace this. It's a big moment for the franchise. It's probably the biggest trade in franchise history. I can't get on you for that. But for me, I'm past the point of getting excited because the Jets made a big off-season move. I've seen it before. I mean, I saw it with Mike Tannenbaum. I saw it with John Idzik. Well, maybe less Idzik than other GMs, but I've seen it with Mike McCagnon. I've even seen it with Joe Douglas at this point. And I've seen them, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But I'm past the point of getting excited about something like this because I want to see wins on the field. That's really my focus right now. It's not about winning the offseason. I've seen the Jets win the offseason plenty. I want to see them win games on Sunday. And I understand, there are some people out there saying, we have the longest playoff drought in the NFL. And that's fine. And that's true. But I don't think you make a move like this just to end the playoff drought. There are plenty of quarterbacks who could have ended the playoff drought for the Jets. And, another thing I hear it's kind of similar to that is we just want to see enjoyable football. Again, you don't need to get a quarterback. You don't need to get Aaron Rodgers to just see enjoyable football. In fact, I'll let you in on a little secret. Easy to forget because of how they ended the season, but the Jets played enjoyable football the first 3 months of the season last year. You forget the Jets were 7-4. Jets were right in the playoff mix heading into the month of December last year, and really at that point it was going to take a collapse for the team to miss the playoffs. And of course, what happened? The team collapsed. Despite losing, despite going on a long losing streak, the Jets were still alive week 17. If they had gone out to Seattle and won, they still would have had a shot to make the playoffs week 18. So you don't need. I don't think you need a quarterback I don't think you need Aaron Rodgers to make the playoffs. I don't think you need Aaron Rodgers for enjoyable football. In fact, the Jets got just quality quarterback play last year. They would have been in the playoffs. Things broke right for them. I don't think you go out and you give up a first-round pick for a 40-year-old quarterback. I know he's 39, he'll be 40 during the season, but I don't think you give up that pick just for these smaller goals. I think you do it for the big goal. That's winning the championship. Because what's the point otherwise? I mean, there are moves you make, and I talked in the first segment about how you judge moves relative to their price. You could go out and get a stopgap quarterback, a guy I talked about earlier in the offseason, Derek Carr. If you sign him to a 3-4 year deal, he was not going to be a top 10 salaried quarterback. He's not, but he's also not a guy who comes with those big expectations. I think with a Derek Carr, what your goal is to bring stability to the franchise. You're looking for a guy who's going to step in and give you quality quarterback play after Zach Wilson did not work out, after Sam Darnold did not work out. You want somebody who you could have had somebody who would have given you quality quarterback play over the next 3 to 4 years, would have given you time to draft your future quarterback, and essentially I think play the role of maybe what Alex Smith did in Kansas City before they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Alex Smith bought Kansas City time to wait for the right prospect to come to them, and they went out and got Patrick Mahomes, and then they sat Mahomes for a year and waited till he was ready. They did not feel the need to reach for a quarterback prior to 2017. They did not feel the need to rush Mahomes into the lineup before he was ready. That's the situation you get with a Derek Carr, which would have been a moderate signing. It would have brought the team to competitiveness. He probably would have helped the Jets make the playoffs at some point over the next couple of years. He could have ended that drought. You don't need to, so I look at what did the Jets need from a quarterback that they get. For Derek Carr, it's, you're not paying as much, you're not giving up the resources, you would not have traded draft picks. The threshold would have been lower. If you're giving up a first round pick and a second round pick and a pick swap and, a few other things, and paying Aaron Rodgers a lot of money, and he's only going to be here, and I think that's a key point because a draft pick you can miss on. There's no guarantees with the draft pick, but we saw the value of draft picks last year. The Jets had one of the best drafts in their history last year. You saw how that could change a franchise, because the reason the Jets were in position to make the playoffs at the beginning of the month of December was because of how their young players were developing. So you see the value of draft picks. So if I'm going to give up something that valuable, something that's not a guarantee, but something that could turn into a franchise-altering player, especially when we're talking about an early-round pick, there needs to be a big reward. And we've all been waiting around here. And I know some of you may have become Jets fans more recently, but a lot of us have been through playoff runs before. We've been to the playoffs. It may have been a long time ago, but we don't need to see the playoffs. We've been to the playoffs before, even if it was a long time ago. A lot of us have been to the AFC Championship game. 3 times since I've followed the Jets, they've been to the AFC Championship game. A lot of you, it's 2. Some of you, it's 4. Some of you go back to that Mud Bowl game in Miami in the early 80s. So what we haven't experienced is a championship. And maybe it's not fair to put that weight on Rodgers, but that's part of the reason I think you get him. I think that's part of the reason he's here. You need him to deliver you to the promised land. And I think that's one of the few things. When you're talking about a quarterback on Aaron Rodgers' level, there are a few things you can do at 39 to enhance your legacy. But ending one of the longest championship droughts in pro sports history, in the biggest market with a tortured fan base, I mean, that's a legacy accomplishment right there. And I think, we've seen the Red Sox end their championship drought. We've seen the Cubs end their championship drought in baseball. The Jets are now over 50 years. The Jets are one of these tortured fan bases. We have horrible losses. We've had horrible seasons. We've had horrible management. We've lost every which way. We need somebody to deliver a championship to us. Now, I think I will give you, so there's some nuance in this. If Aaron Rodgers plays at an MVP level and sticks around for a second year and the Jets, get to a Super Bowl and lose, we could argue that maybe it's successful. If he sticks around a second year and, they get to the championship game twice, I mean, I just said it's not enough, but if he's playing at a really high level, I guess you could make an argument that the trade is worth. But the point is, this is a very high threshold, and it has to be something that high for us to even consider it beyond the Super Bowl being successful. So I don't think there's any question. You don't make this move to make the play. You don't make this move to win 10 games. You don't make this move to see enjoyable football. You make this move to do big things, to win a championship, at least get close, and hopefully Aaron Rodgers plays at a high level. Now, we kind of missed it yesterday because of everything that was going on with Aaron Rodgers, but the Jets made a smart re-signing. They got a guy who may help Rodgers play at a high level. It's a guy who has been rumored to be leaving for the last couple of months, but the cooler heads finally prevailed, and the Jets brought back Conor McGovern. As we continue on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about Conor McGovern returning to the Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we are always growing and changing. And therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. And BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Therapy has many positive benefits. It's helpful for learning coping skills, how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself, and it's not just for those who have experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We're going to turn our attention away from Aaron Rodgers a little bit because the Jets actually made a signing that was significant yesterday. It completely flew under the radar because it was far less significant than Aaron Rodgers. But fortunately, everybody's come to their senses now, and Conor McGovern has re-signed with the New York Jets, the center who's been really solid the last... He wasn't great in the first half of his initial season with the Jets, but the last 2.5 years of his 3-year tenure with the Jets, he was very good at the center position. Not Kevin Mawai, not Nick Mangold, but a guy who held the position down well. And the Jets had a gaping hole at center, and I spent a lot of the offseason wondering aloud why McGovern was allowed to leave, why there was no interest in bringing him back. I mean, I thought there should have been negotiations on bringing him back during the season, because when I looked at the free agent class, it did not seem great, and there are a couple of decent center prospects this year. John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, Tippmann out of Wisconsin, but I don't think you ever want to play the we need to draft somebody at this position game, because things can go wrong there. first of all, the guy you want to draft may not be available when you pick, and second of all, it's difficult to project these guys. There are a lot of young players who are not plug-and-play guys. So you had a guy in front of you who was playing effectively, and I did not understand why there was so little interest in bringing him back. And part of this was McGovern. It certainly seems like McGovern thought that there was going to be a bigger market for him out there. And I was saying during the day on Monday, this was almost like the plot of like one of those really bad Hollywood romantic comedies where both sides need each other, but they were too stubborn to admit it and too stubborn to realize it. The Jets needed McGovern at center. McGovern did not find another team that was interested in him, so he needed the Jets. And finally, we get the cliche, terrible Hollywood happy ending. Although I guess it's not a terrible ending. It's just a generic plot twist that McGovern and the Jets finally realize that they belong to each other and they need each other. Now, I actually think looking back on this may have been a sign that the Aaron Rodgers trade was closing, because I think the Jets have like three major needs at this point, and I think there are others that they could address, but there were three glaring holes entering Monday on this roster. One was tackle, which still exists. Some people are going to argue Dwayne Brown, Mekhi Becton, they're fine. I don't agree with that. I don't think you can go into this season with both of those guys at manning the two tackle spots. You want to argue that, between the two of them, they can get you 17 games. I can see that. You want to tell me both of them are going to get you 17 games at a high level? That I don't see. Defensive tackle, which has not been addressed at all since Sheldon Rankins left. Yeah, I know they re-signed Solomon Thomas. They got Quinton Jefferson, who's an okay player. They need a defensive tackle. And center was the third. And of course, the Jets entered Monday with 3 top 43 picks. They had 13, they had 42, and they had 43. 43 came from the Elijah Moore trade. So you had 3 early picks, you had 3 gaping holes. The fact that the Jets signed McGovern kind of told me that this Rodgers trade was going down, because you knew one of those second-round picks was probably going to Green Bay, so you'd only have 2 early picks. And now you have 15 and 43. So, because they traded 42 to Green Bay. So you look at this, it seems, maybe in retrospect, it was kind of a sign of things to come, but the Jets finally addressed the offensive line at the center position this offseason. They need it. Listen, Aaron Rodgers is going to be 40 years old this season. He'll turn 40 during the season. Jets got to protect him. When you got a 40-year-old quarterback, even a guy who was good at evading pressure early in his career, that begins to deteriorate, and it has deteriorated with Rodgers. They can address tackle during the draft, and hopefully they find somebody who's a plug-and-play starter. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy, but at least the center position is now handled. At least the Jets' offensive line is a little bit better, and you can worry a little bit less about Aaron Rodgers than you did heading into this week. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review, a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Have a great Tuesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.